Hey, good morning. Welcome to the Intimacy of Race and our Coffee and Conversations with my special guest, Connie Benjamin. Now, I am really excited to speak with Connie, but I am going to do the obligatory read her bio first. And let me just pull this up on my computer. So Connie is the #1 international best-selling author of the book, Women with Fire, an international speaker and podcast host of My Fire Within Radio. After nearly losing her marriage and almost giving up the entrepreneurial journey, she and her husband, Andy, began a quest to live their mission without losing their family. They developed the My Fire Within system that helped them fall in love again, replace their day job income, and love being stay-at-home parents to their 3 daughters. 3 daughters. Wow. Girl, you are my hero. I barely survived 2. Using their proprietary My Fire Within system, they are now on a mission to empower other entrepreneurs who have lost passion for their purpose within their relationship and business to relight their fire within themselves, their marriage, and their business connections. So Connie and I today are really going to be discussing interracial relationships during this time of racial unrest and the fight for equality and justice for Black lives. Now, the reason why I asked Connie on, not only is she a firehouse, welcome Connie.
Thank you so much.
That's why her podcast is My Fire Within, because this girl is on fire. But when I was on Connie's podcast, you know, we had stayed on and chatted a little bit after, and she let me know that her husband is Black and that she has been having some, you know, feeling a certain type of way around what's going on. And we're just going to have an intimate conversation. Those of you who don't know me very well and are just hopping in, I am also married to a white man who is of German descent. He's actually German. And so not an American white man, but, you know, when this whole George Floyd video of his murder came to light and more of us were outraged, enraged, feeling hurt, pain, and all the feels that came up with seeing that video, you know, you and I both, I'm sure, were feeling a type of way with how to deal with this properly, if there is such a thing to deal with it properly, but also the emotions around it. So if you could share with our audience, you know, just what that was like for you.
Oh my goodness. Eva, first of all, I want to thank you so much for being here.
Connie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can. Thanks.
So I want to thank you for allowing me and inviting me to be here. I love that you're providing the space to talk about this. And when I think about that moment in history, I remember feeling outraged that it happened and confused about what I could do, how I could support. And I remember vividly so many conversations with my husband, Andy, where I was saying, Andy, like, I can't, it's terrible that this happened. What do we do? What do we do? And he's like, I don't know. I don't know, Connie. I don't know what the answer is. And it was this place of, it was just so confusing. I mean, I looked at my husband and I thought, oh my gosh, like, first of all, is it safe for us to travel all over the world? Because there is discrimination. It's tangible. And I think I've never been face to face with understanding that if I went and traveled somewhere and Andy and I are together, potentially he could be at risk just because of the color of his skin. And that to me terrified me. And then on top of that, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how do I talk about this? I honestly, Eva, when the first time that we talked about it was the first time I began that conversation in public, because I had lots of conversations with my husband in closed doors, but I was always so afraid to say the wrong thing, to offend people, to overstep, or to be misconstrued in what I was talking about, that I was silent. And I think that there's no room for silence. I think that that misunderstandings and aloneness happens in the silence. So I'm grateful for this conversation today.
And I'm so grateful that you have agreed to have it, because we've never really talked about it in depth. So, you know, those who are listening and watching us right now know that we are really having this conversation. There's nothing pre-scripted. And, you know, here's the thing about the silence and what I am discovering about what non-Black allies of this movement for racial equality and justice. And I'll say it that way because a lot of people have energy just around the initials BLM or the organization, but I'm just talking about on a human nature, racial justice and equality for all. And right now we're talking about Black lives. The silence, the guilt, the fear, the trepidation, all of the feels. You know, for me, I knew that I couldn't do business as normal, business as usual, because I was grieving at a deep level that it felt very generational and ancestral. And so I couldn't ignore it. You know, this was a call to like, yeah, silent no more. And just to be clear, not, you know, Black people have been silent too. So, you know, this is something that comes up on both sides. But to not spend any time in guilt and shame around that, because there was confusion. There's a lot of emotion on social media and in our homes, in our communities at large. And how do we best navigate that so that we're helping and not hurting was what came up for me. So can you share a little bit about what opened up for you in now having some conversations and what that looks like?
Absolutely. And just so you know, Eva, for some reason, it's a little bit fuzzy when you're audio, just so you're aware. What came up for me, I think, was, first of all, I wanted to know what I could do, and I felt kind of helpless about what can I do. I mean, luckily, these conversations and conversations around the world are happening about knowing what we can do, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. But the other thing came up, and just to give you a bit of context, can I share a little bit of my story and kind of our journey as a family? So just to give you some context, so my husband's Black, and he's often said to me, you know, Connie, I don't know how I feel about all of this, because it's confusing for everyone. And we also have children that look very, very different. So we have, you know, some children that are blonde hair and blue eyes. Eva, I have no idea how that happened, because you look at me, not blonde hair, not blue eyes. And you look at my husband, definitely not blonde hair and blue eyes. And so when I first had my first baby, Zoe, people would literally look at Zoe, look at Andy, look at me, look back at Zoe, look at us, and you could see the wheels spinning in their head of, Connie, did you have an affair? Like, where did this blonde hair, blue eye baby come from? And so that was a really weird situation for me, where I felt like I had to justify and say, no, I'm, you know, I am committed to my husband. No, this baby really is both of ours. I feel, and honestly, Eva, I would get kind of outraged with it, and I would eventually start making up these crazy stories, because I was so outraged that this would happen, just to make the person giving me the awkward look feel uncomfortable, because I was like, man, you don't be judging me. This is my baby. This is my husband's baby. Wow. Because I was so outraged at people's perception. And then I had my second daughter, same thing, blonde hair, blue eyes. She looks just like her grandmother on my husband's side. So my husband, his mom is white. His dad is Black. His dad's from Jamaica. His mom's from New Brunswick in Canada. And my daughters have the exact eyes of his mom. And so obviously people, again, would be making assumptions. And I'd say, well, she looks just like her grandmother. And they'd assume it's my mom. Well, my mom has green eyes and brown hair, curly, dark brown hair. So just all these assumptions, and this has really got me thinking about these assumptions. Now then I had my third baby, and my third baby has brown eyes, brown hair, brown skin. And we would go shopping, and I would be in the grocery store, and I had my babies my two youngest close together in age, and they'd be sitting in the shopping cart. Oh my gosh, they were adorable. They were like 18 months apart. I don't know. That was just a happy surprise. And so we would be going through the grocery store, and, you know, older people come up to me and say, oh my goodness, they're so sweet. Are they adopted? I'm like, no, they're sisters. And they're all of these assumptions. And so for me, that experience has kind of just led me to understanding how many assumptions are going on that, you know what I mean? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I want to interject here. And I tried to do something with the sound. Is it any better, or is it still fuzzy?
It's still fuzzy, yeah.
Oh.
And I want to hear every word you had to say, Eva.
Okay. But what I wanted, you know, I'm testing my mic and stuff here, but what I wanted to share with you, yeah, it looks like it's working perfectly on this end. So I'm hoping it's just your headphones, fingers crossed, was what you call assumptions is what the Black community experience as unconscious biases and microaggressions. You know, saying things to us. I'm trying to think of an example now, but just like that, when my youngest daughter was very, very light-skinned when she was born, and when I would be out with her in the stroller, that I was assumed to be the nanny for some reason. But I'm going to say that I choose to believe it's because I looked just so young, and there was no way I could have this baby. But yes, I was assumed to be the nanny in that case. And the way people make what you call assumptions are really unconscious biases and microaggressions. And that was probably more towards the children, I would venture to say, than you at that point, because you did have one child that was brown. And so the assumptions that people make, a lot of them don't realize the implications of the underlying systemic racism that's underneath those assumptions. So I just wanted to interject that piece. I didn't want to interrupt your story, but hopefully you heard me.
Yes, absolutely. Your audio got really great. So thank you for sharing that. And absolutely, absolutely. You know, what's interesting, I began reading a book by Malcolm Gladwell, and it's called Talking to Strangers. I don't know if you've ever heard that book.
I have heard of it, yeah.
Oh my goodness. So we began reading it. We're not finished the book yet, but it's amazing because it talks about those biases, and it talks about the misunderstanding that we have about people generally that maybe look different than we do, or that we don't understand their story. We have these misconceptions and these biases and the discrimination as well. And so I think that what you just said and the parts that I've heard about that book just made me think about how important it is for us to have conversations like this, for us to hear each other's stories, for us to gain that understanding, because we don't understand what's going on for someone else. We can't have been through their world. And honestly, when I look at, there's been times where I've posted a supporting post on Facebook, whether it's about COVID or whether it's about what's happening with Black Lives Matter movement, but some sort of movement that is so important, and I'll post something about it. And Eva, I can't believe how much outrage and contention and division comes up. And I just think about, like, if we can just like shut our mouths and open our ears and listen
Yep.
and seek to understand, then 99% of the contention and the heartache, like we just need to understand. We need to hear the stories. We need to, and I truly believe that it's through the understanding of stories that things change. I mean, there's a book I read not long ago called Influencer. I don't know if you've heard that book.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, it's so right. So amazing.
I haven't read it, but I've heard of it as well. But, you know, I love how you're referencing to listen. And, you know, the listening really is to hear the stories, because there's no way that you can have empathy for the Black experience unless you're Black. There's no way you can have it, whether you're married to a Black person, whether you have Black children. It's a different feeling. And so to open your ears, to listen, and to have, I like to say, just compassion at the level that you can have compassion, but also to believe us when we say it's like that, not deny it, because the denial is coming up you know, that is the sword of racism, is the denial that it exists, or blaming the victim or the oppressed or the underserved, marginalized communities. It's their fault. And you see some of these memes and these hate things that these things that come up for hate on social media. And, you know, I know as an intelligent woman, you see and you know what appears to be the right thing to do. But when it comes to having these conversations in your family, with your husband, with your daughters, what kinds of things are you guys talking about around these issues?
Well, we often talk about it because, you know, yeah, I'm just thinking about, there's been several times where my daughter has been coming home from school, and she'll talk about, tell me about this point in history, what happened there. And we'll talk about how it's impacted our family or generations of family. And, and so we often talk about it. That when my kids were little, actually, this is can I tell you a crazy story?
Yeah.
Hopefully this is one of those times where I'm like, I hope this is not an inappropriate story, but there was a time where my daughter was super little, and she was going around the table, and she said, "Mom, you're white." And I'm like, okay, where's this going? You know? And she goes, "And Dad, you're brown." And we're like, okay, it's time for a conversation about this. Okay, where's this going? And she goes, "And Zoe, you're purple." And we're like, tell me more of what's going on.
What's going on in that little brain?
Right? Yeah. And what was happening was she was looking at the color of our t-shirts. She was saying, "Mom, you're white. You're wearing a white t-shirt. Dad, you're brown. You're wearing a brown t-shirt. And Zoe, you're purple. You're wearing a purple t-shirt."
Oh, how cute.
Yeah. And to me, that was such a beautiful, beautiful understanding of how freaking smart kids are. Like how brilliant they are, that they just, I was mom, I'm mom, yeah. And Dad's dad, and Zoe's purple. And like, you know, they just have this amazing openness and understanding of the person. And
how old are they now?
So Zoe is 12 and Aria is 6 and Isla is 5.
Okay, so you got the littles. And who's the little brown one of the three?
Isla.
The baby. So she still has that beautiful innocence. I remember when my youngest daughter was around that age. And I remember looking at her one day and I was like, "Kayla, do you know that you're Black?" And she looked at me, she goes, "I'm not Black, but my sister is," because her sister had a darker skin tone. And she looks at herself, she goes, "I'm pink." And, you know, it's innocent and it's cute, but at the same time, they'll come to that realization that they're different from the described norms that we see in all of our advertising and social media and television and everything. And they'll wonder why I don't look exactly like my sister, or my skin's a little browner, or somebody in school said something. And so with my husband and myself, I don't have children with this husband. And so my children are from my first husband. So that, you know, other than my daughter's childlike innocence, there was no real issue in their own identity. However, I know that it's got to be a struggle in interracial families to have these conversations, why people daddy's color are treated differently, or your color are treated differently, or people are saying mean things and people are doing this stuff that doesn't feel good and doesn't make us feel good. How, as a mom, and especially as a white mom to children who are fathered by a Black man, have these conversations in their home?
I think, first of all, the conversations for us start really young. Like we set it up so that our kids can ask us anything, and we do that when they're really young. And so it for me, it's about finding those teaching moments in the opportunity. I remember vividly Zoe coming home from school and saying to me, "Mom, like, what is going on? I'm hearing about Black Lives Matter. I heard someone died. Like, what is happening?" And so to openly right there in that moment have those conversations and tell her about the injustice and tell her about what's happening and tell her about the change that is being sought. We just constantly have these conversations. I remember, you know, there's points in time she'd come home and she'd say, Mom, we talked about in history, we talked about a movement that happened. They were saying that white people and black people couldn't be married. And oh my gosh, like, is that real? What happened there? And I said, yeah, like, and then we tell the story of her grandmother and her grandfather that their priest refused to marry them. Refused to marry them based on color. I mean, this was in the 70s. And then them trying to get an apartment to live and people literally denying them because of interracial marriage, like insane stuff. And so we talk about the gratitude that we have for the leaders that have changed that has changed that, so that, and we talk about that because of leaders that have fought for equality and fought for families to be able to fall in love with who they love. That's why mom and dad can be married together, and that's why we can be here. And so we need to celebrate them. We need to know them. Yeah. So we just have these conversations when they come up.
Yeah. And so in the last few minutes that we have, you know, I really want to delve deep into a little bit of something that you shared when we spoke after the podcast a few weeks ago about your fear of saying the wrong thing and not knowing what to say. Can you speak a little bit into what that was like for you?
Sure, Eva. I just love you because I have to admit. So I'm getting ready for this interview and I'm saying to my husband, Andy, I've done a lot of interviews, whether it's in the media or on podcasts. I said, this is the one I'm most nervous about. He's like, why? I said, I'm terrified I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm terrified that I'm not going to be as much up to the news as what's happening. I feel guilty for not reading the entire Malcolm, you know, the Malcolm Gladwell book yet. I feel
so funny.
All of these things, like I want answers. I want to know. And so I think that there is a vulnerability in talking about this and talking about the fear. I don't want to offend people. I don't. And that gets hard. That gets hard sometimes when you know there's an issue that needs, it's there. I don't deal well with elephants in the room. Like I have to, I literally go squirrely. I have to be like, guys, does anybody else like, there's a big elephant in the room. Like we should talk about this.
Yeah. I don't see it. Where is it? What elephant?
Totally. There's no elephant.
People, and I'm glad you said elephant because here's what I would say to you. One bite at a time, sweetheart. One bite at a time. Because none of us are getting it right 100% of the time. We're on a journey. We're on a marathon. It's not a sprint. And, you know, here's where my compassion comes in. You know, so many people, because of that fear of offending, not getting it right, not knowing all the answers, are holding back. And that's going to stifle the conversation. And where courage comes in is just preface it. It's not my intention to offend or hurt anybody, but no, I'm not perfect and I'm going to get it wrong. And then you've dealt with the elephant in the room. Like, look, I'm going to mess up. And so I welcome feedback. That's it. And then you've kind of dismantled everything. Just name it. Just name it. Like, this is scary for me. And I'll share something with you as well, because my husband's white. And as a Black woman who's been Black for 60 years, I have been guilty of protecting white fragility in my life, especially when it comes around my husband and his family. And what I am realizing now, growing up with a dad who is, you know, who's now in his late 80s, and was a police officer in the civil rights movement, was a police officer that wasn't allowed to ride in a squad car with white officers because he was Black, was a police officer that actually, you know, there's pictures all over my house, my parents' house, I should say, where I am now, which is why the funky pine paneling. It doesn't get any more 70s than this. Has pictures of him and Dr. Martin Luther King. He was a bodyguard for Dr. Martin Luther King as a plainclothes officer when he came to our hometown. And I share that with you because Black people have grown up being told, don't say anything to offend white people. Be careful. Don't say that. Let it go. So as Black women, we have this resilience to microaggressions and unconscious biases, and just being tough for our men, being tough for our families, being strong and resilient. And as a result, it actually created a situation where we are guilty of protecting white fragility, because we knew forever in our generations, deep into our blood, 400 years, that any offense that a white person takes because of something you did or said could end your life. And so what's coming to light for me now, and which is why I love having this discussion with you, is where I'm still protecting white fragility in my own family. And so when I finally watched the video of George Floyd, I was a wreck, crying for days. And to my husband's credit, because the work we've been doing on our relationship for a number of years now, because we also had a similar story of you and your husband, and we talked about that before, he didn't tell me it would be okay. He didn't tell me to stop crying. All he did was put his arms around me and hold space for me. That's it. He just held space for me. He did not try to fix it, because as you know, as a white person, and as he knows as a white person, he can't fix it. I've got to feel my emotions. There's nothing he can do or say to make me feel better. And what he did, and the amount of relief that I felt in that moment, like, oh, thank God you're not going to say it's not that bad. It's okay. He should have done that. I mean, he didn't go, and I didn't know what to expect. He could have gone into that excuse of racism. Well, if he had just obeyed the law, the cops wouldn't have had to snuff his life out for passing a counterfeit $20 bill, because that is a deathly offense. None of that happened. And even now, as I've delved into the work of creating a space for supporters of Black lives to be messy and make mistakes, but because the intention and their heart is in the right place, like, let's break. The only way out is through. It's through the uncomfortableness. It's through the messiness. It's through getting it wrong and having the resources to get it right. So it's not about wanting to be right. You just want to be on the journey of getting it right. And it's not going to happen at the beginning. So I know what it feels like to, my first thought was like, oh my God, he did not marry a Black activist. That's not what we said in our vows. And all of a sudden things have shifted and changed. What is this going to do to our relationship? Because I can't back down to protect his feelings at this point. I was not about that. But the amount of support that he has shown for me, and even when I'm frustrated and want to go and vent, and I feel like I've hijacked my interview of you. I'm so sorry, but I really wanted to share this with you, that we get to be messy, we get to make mistakes, but we get to have the conversation. And every once in a while, I'll check with my husband. How do you feel about what I'm doing? How do you feel? I don't expect you to be protesting, marching with me on my Facebook Lives, although I would love him to come, but we're working on that. But, is he having an oh shit moment? Like, what have I got myself into in this marriage? We've gone through and overcome so much stuff. Can we get through this? And I have to say that he has been my rock through all of this, and my rock of encouragement, and really explaining the place where people are coming from when I'm in my triggered little tizzy, like, I'm going to get up, it'll never change, and I can't, blah, 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 all of that stuff. So sorry for chatting on and on like that, but I just really want to share that with you.
Oh my goodness. Eva, never say sorry. I love what you're talking about. And I think actually what you're talking about really is foundational to all of it. And there's a few things that you said that are so powerful. Can I briefly kind of share some of my thoughts? Okay. One, I love that you're talking about when you were going through that, when you're experiencing that, he was so there for you. He had your back. And in our work, what we talk about that as the fire connection, that true connection that's like, he sees you, he feels you, he's got your back. And I wonder if when we can step into these conversations, recognizing that it's going to be messy, we're not going to do things right, but when we can come from a place of seeking the fire connection. And when I talk about the fire connection, it really is like a triangle. It's the divinity of yourself, your best self. It's understanding the divinity, or seeking to understand the divinity of the other person, and seeking to connect with the divine. I truly believe that when we do that, we will see the person. We'll be open to hearing the story. We'll shut our own stories, our own biases, our own judgments. We'll shut them down and be willing to be present and to hear. Because I believe that it's through stories that things transform. When we understand people's worlds, we see them differently.
Yeah. A story not shared doesn't serve. And your story can be the survival guide for someone else. So think of it that way. When anyone who's listening to this or is watching this is tempted to hold back, know that your story can be the survival guide for someone else. Yeah. Thank you, my dear. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your story with us and anyone who can be helped by, because I know I've been asked a lot of times, well, what about you? You're married to a white person. Yes, I am. I'm married for love, not for color. And I've been in love with many different colors in my lifetime. And this is the one that stuck. It's going to be 11 years next week or the week after, honey. I'll figure it out. But 18 together, which is amazing. I told him the other day, I was like, wow, you're the longest relationship I've had outside of my parents and my kids. Really? Yay! So this has been amazing. I hope this helped anyone who is watching and just wondering how to still have an impact and be influential, even though you don't have all the answers, even though you're scared of saying the wrong thing. Just have your intention and your heart in the right place and be messy, and it'll be okay because you're on a journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Thank you, Connie. Thank you to our viewers, and we'll see you next week at the same time. I'll be back home and we'll be doing our coffee and conversations from California. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.